All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session of Two Points of View at Two. Thank you all for tuning in to this webinar. I think in the past, these webinars may have felt like a break from meetings and other face-to-face stuff, but now they probably feel a lot like business as usual. Here you are on yet another Zoom session, just a different pair of folks on the talking side. So I'm Rex Black. For those of you who don't know, I'm president of RBCS. We are a worldwide testing and quality assurance firm serving clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 20 global enterprises. Since 1994, we have delivered insight and confidence to hundreds of clients around the world. We have a team of international consultants that deliver customized training, consulting, and expert services to companies that are looking to improve their test and quality assurance practices. And in this session, I am happy to welcome a good longtime friend of mine, Jose Mata. Jose has worked over 20 years as a software quality assurance consultant and manager working in Austin, San Francisco, New York, and Paris. And I'm proud to say I had something to do with some of those locations. As a member of the ASTQB Technical Advisory Group, Jose wrote questions for the foundation level qualification exams. And he is currently a senior software test engineer at Narrative DX, or is it Narrative Docs?
DX, yeah.
Narrative DX, an internet startup in Austin, Texas, providing AI-driven analyses of healthcare data. So that's cool. We got a good word in there, a good abbreviation in there, AI. So in this presentation, we will move the Selenium, or Selenium, if you want to mispronounce the word, automated testing from concept to implementation. And the way that Jose is going to do that is he's going to give you some tips on overcoming some basic gotchas involved in bootstrapping Selenium testing. So if you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please submit them at any time. And we, well, Jose, through the intermediary of me, will answer them right at the end. So we'll jump right into it here. Here you've got the intro information. Of course, this will be available. The slides will be available as part of a recorded webinar and also posted on our website. And we'll go to the topics that Jose wants to address, these gotchas, and I will hand it over to you, Jose.
All right, thanks, Rex. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
So when Rex asked me to talk about something with this automated testing, one of the first things I thought of is that when I got started, I would read anything that I could, and I'm going to pronounce it Selenium because that's what everybody in the software world calls it. And yes, I do know that's technically incorrect. Yeah, it's named for the moon. Anyways, in Greek.
Wow.
When I first got started, you would just read anywhere that, oh, it's easy. You just, you look for IDs to locate web elements and no problem. Then you go and you grab that and you work on it and you move on. The reality, once I started actually testing, reality hit me in the face. I said, "Oh, a lot of the code doesn't actually have the elements in there. It's not coded in, and there are a lot of cases where it's not practical to use IDs to identify web elements. Anytime that some of the code is repeated, right? If you have, say, a template for a modal, and you're changing out part of the modal, but let's say that the OK or cancel buttons are part of the template, then you would not necessarily be getting the right element. So you have to figure out a way to get around that. I've also run across cases where they will the code will auto-generate the ID. It'll add in identifying data to the ID name. So that makes it hard to do because it's going to be changing. One of the solutions is if you have access to the code, and in this job, I do have access where I can actually go in and add IDs, but previous jobs, I haven't been able to do that. So kind of just want to talk about ways to get around all this. So if, I guess we're not really taking questions as we go, so I'll just keep talking if that's good, Rex. Or you can chime in if you have any.
Yeah, if you'd like to take questions as they come in, I'm happy to throw them to you. I'm watching the Q&A panel. Usually we take them at the end, but if you're open to answering them as they go, I will, when you get between thoughts, throw the questions at you.
Okay, well, why don't we do it this way? Why don't we do it per bullet point?
Sure.
And then, but if you had anything where you think I'm not being, or if you just had a question as I'm discussing, then why don't you chime in at that point?
Sure, I may well do that, yeah.
Okay, so I'll move on. So when you cannot locate by, let's take the example of the modal and current job, we use actually a framework called Vue, V-U-E, and it is a templating framework. So you see this a lot. And what you can do though is you can use a class name, which is not unique to an HTML page. And so that's a disadvantage, but at least now you have something you can target when you're locating a web element. So once again, if you have the capability of adding the class name, you can do that. The next thing that you have to do is now, because it's a class name, is not unique to the DOM, to the HTML page. You have to be more specific in which element that you're looking at. So that is where XPath is your friend. I know that some people prefer to use CSS selectors. I almost exclusively use XPath, which is a very powerful tool. And you can go online and find out a lot of information on XPath to select web elements. And hopefully I'm not just talking Greek there to you, Rex. Are you kind of following that?
Yeah, and I was kind of wondering, you say, okay, I can do it this way or I can do it that way. Is it really just a matter of taste? Like which, you get comfortable doing it one way or the other?
I am 90% sure that it is a question of taste. So if you're more, if you're more in the CSS, if you're more CSS knowledgeable, it's just going to be more natural for you.
I see.
Everything that I've read, like on Stack Overflow, which is always your friend.
Yes, for sure.
Is that it's basically, it's like Mac and Windows. So you have your preference and your expertise. Mine is in XPath.
So would it make sense then for an organization to sort of stylistically ask that everybody in the team do it one way or the other, just for consistency of scripting?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah,
actually, it just makes sense, right?
yeah.
There's. I don't think either one is harder than the other. It's just a question of you get your set of functions, which talk about. Well, are we gonna talk? Yeah, the last bullet point is talking about locator and helper functions.
Yeah.
So you would design those to be XPath centric or CSS selector centric.
Cool. Well, let's talk about that when we get to that bullet then, and how it varies one from the other.
Yep. So, and the nice thing about XPath is that you can actually, if you consider ID to be a type of attribute versus class name, you can actually embed that into an XPath string that you're searching for. So people who are watching, listening to this will probably just have to take notes and then go do searches online to know what I'm talking about. It's a little too deep to get into right here. But the next thing that I really want to talk about regarding XPath, and something I didn't learn right away, and it's not in any of the just online information that's not a tutorial is that you can make an XPath string select on more than one piece as part of your overall selection. So without being able to give you something visual, I'll just say, for example, you're looking for a class name called foo, right? Well, foo is going to show up, a couple of places. Now, you can actually set up the string so that you actually look for a specific descendant of foo, for instance, that will identify a specific web element as opposed to just every instance of foo. So, for instance, if you're in Chrome, and I guess most people right now are developing in Chrome, and if you're looking at if you're searching through the HTML, if you're doing a find in there, for instance, you can find on class name that you care about, and you might say, oh, it actually shows up 4 different times. Well, that means that when you're running the test, it can be getting any one of those 4, kind of just depending on the way that it executes. So you have to be more specific, and XPath is your friend for doing that. So that took me, a little bit just to ask around and figure out that I could be able to be more specific than that. Back when I first started, when I was in reading things, they'd say, "Oh, don't use XPath; it's slow and it's messy and so on." But this is one of the only ways that I know of. Well, again, with CSS selectors, that you can get the specific element that you need, and that's you can't really do anything unless you know what you're working on. So that's actually that, and we're kind of. I need to move on a little bit, I guess. Can I move on, Rex?
Sure, yeah, please.
Okay. So let's talk about.
Well, we did have a question here that came up from Colin. He said, "Is he talking about XPaths?" Obviously, you were talking about XPaths. I think he was alluding to some specific statement that you made and asking whether it was in reference to XPaths, perhaps in contrast to CSS. You're saying you could do it. You can do pretty much anything either way, right?
Yes, like I said, I'm not a real CSS selector kind of guy, but yeah, as far as I understand, yes.
Yeah, but your preference, just because it's your preference, is XPath.
Right, and Colin might have been wondering, because I did say if you're looking for a class name, as I was kind of saying, it's hard if you can't see the actual code, but embedded into an XPath string, you can specify that you're looking for class within that, or ID is part of it. And then you can say, after that, you can // and then look for the next piece that you're looking for.
Got it.
So, yeah, so that's
was what he was asking. He said, thanks, Jose.
You're welcome. Yeah. So yeah, digging into that, and there's a pretty good course in the making in there, I think. Yeah. So moving on, I guess just for time. So another thing that I learned, this is basically for beginners, right? And there's almost always different ways to do things, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are better ways, but this is how I got unblocked when I was starting to Bootstrap. There's something called expected conditions. Oh, here's another thing. On this particular job, I'm using Python bindings. The previous one I used Ruby. It's similar but different in Java, so some of the names might be a little different. But there is a set of modules in Python, I guess libraries, that you can use to specify whether you want to find something for an element being clickable, whether it's visible, whether it's just present in the DOM, and that kind of stuff. That's really useful for when you're debugging the test, right? Because then you'll know whether or not, especially if you're running headless, right? where you can't actually see what's happening. You'll know whether or not it was actually the element was visible, right, on the screen or not.
Yeah.
At that time. I know I'm kind of saying a bunch of concepts at one time for a beginner, so I apologize for that. But the takeaway from this is look at what Selenium gives you with regard to expected conditions. They will definitely be your friend and let you know precisely what it is that the state of the element is. So I guess I'll just leave it at that, just because we need to keep moving. Unless Rex, did you want to?
No questions coming up with respect to that. I could take us down a rabbit hole on this thing, but I think, well, in the interest of time, I won't.
Okay. No, yeah, because I want to leave some time at the end so we don't blow out somebody's time because they might be just taking a little bit of time at work.
Right.
Although with COVID-19, what's 5 minutes on your work time? Make it up at the end. Okay, the next point is another gotcha, is dealing with alerts. So when I first, I think we all know what alerts are, right? It's a message that pops up on the screen, and it usually will be for an error condition, that kind of stuff. When they show up, let's say that it has a certain amount of text that says error, string not found or whatever. And if you were to go query, go do a find in the HTML, you would not be able to find that string, right? And so if you wanted to test that the string is coming up on the alert, you're not going to be able to find it, or you're not going to be able to dismiss it. And nowhere really is there. Did I find information just generically when you're learning about Selenium testing? Of course, you go through Stack Overflow again, and you'll learn how to get around it. But the basic idea is that the alerts are not actually part of the browser page. You have to you have different functions that you can use to work with them, right? You can, for instance, in the Python variant of Selenium, you have a function called switch to alert, right? And then you can work on the alert. You can have a function called accept or dismiss for the alert. But once again, it was kind of mind-blowing to me that I expected to be part of the DOM, and I can work at it because it's visible, but they're different. Once you know that.
So how do you know, like, okay, accept or dismiss or how do you know that the alert is up there if Selenium's not able to observe that it's up there directly?
Yeah, so you pretty much have to. Well, you're doing. This is for a positive test, right? So you know that you expect there to be an alert, and then you can actually you can then switch to the alert through that function called switch to alert. You can then get the object. Right, so an example would be alert equals driver dot switch to alert. Now you have the object, which you've now called alert, and now you can operate on it. So,
but you have to basically be expecting it to happen. If it's something that came out of nowhere, you saying that would really trip up your script?
Yeah, it's the way that I handle it right now, and the plan is to get better at this. But right now, almost all of my tests are regression tests, and not even really regression tests. Well, yeah, but anyways, they're positive tests. So if an alert comes out of sequence unexpectedly, then I just throw an exception and then fail that particular test.
Okay, so you would, all you would know is something weird happened. And I assume you'd be able to capture a screenshot of that, right? And say, this is what the screen looked like when that weird thing happened.
Mhm.
And then you would bail out of that test would fail, and you'd move on to the next one.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about the Java variant, but in Python, you pretty much do not get the unexpected alert in a screenshot. Probably, I'm guessing here, and I don't know this,
Uh,
probably because it's not part of the DOM or something. But you can get the traceback though. It's pretty robust, where the traceback will tell you unexpected alert found.
no, I see.
So that's not so bad, right? So you throw the exception, you go ahead and you log off the traceback, and then you should be okay.
And at that point, you have to basically do something to restore the system to a known good state before you proceed on to the next test.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Most of the time at that point, I'll explicitly do a driver quit, so it'll quit that particular instance of the browser, and so the next test will start up with a fresh one.
Fresh browser. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I don't want to spend any more time on alerts, but that's just
Sure.
just a reminder. So don't think that you're being crazy. That you're being crazy by not being able to find that. So.
Yeah, it must have been pretty mystifying when that first started happening, right? Of like, oh, I can see it. What the heck is going on?
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
What's happening?
Yeah. Then the other final one is just a generic thought.
Well, before we go to the last bullet, though, I did have a question backing up to the expected condition
Yeah.
topic. Michael asks, is expected condition deprecated?
It's definitely not deprecated in the Python bindings. I'm not sure about any others.
Huh.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it were, because I'm not sure what would take its place.
Unexpected condition, the anticipated condition, maybe this will happen thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does seem like that's kind of like you need to be able to do that.
yeah, there's nothing else in the Python implementation that would tell me whether something is visible or invisible or present or not. So if it is deprecated, I haven't seen anything that would replace it yet.
Michael is saying he's using C++. And,
Yeah.
I guess, well, it's.
Yeah,
You've not used that, right? You've used Java and.
No, Ruby and Python.
Ruby and Python, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh, weird.
Okay. Well, that's worth digging into. It'd be nice to know. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Well, let's continue on to the locator and helper functions one.
Yeah, this is just a generic thing. It kind of more in your bailiwick in a way, Rex, just because you're always good about kind of talking about best practices, and this is very obvious to a real developer. But I didn't start off as a real developer, as quite a few QA people are, and it really makes a lot of sense to make locator and helper functions. So if you want to say find by ID or find by class name, or if you want to do a simple set of steps that are generic, I definitely find that it saves a lot of time, because you can start adding in like error handling in these functions.
Yeah.
That are a lot more specific, that will help in debugging again.
Yeah, I think just from a general test automation point of view, the idea of having a lot of, if there's stuff that you need to do multiple times, encapsulating it in a function and having libraries of functions that allow you to do that is a really good idea from in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
I'm always pleased, like I've done a number of assessments, automation assessments over the last couple of years, where I was pleased to see that the folks were doing that. They had been careful to do that.
Yeah.
You know,
So yeah, this is more going to apply to, like, say a previous couple of jobs where I was just thrown in and said we need some automated UI testing.
yeah.
And I didn't really think about this at first until it just started becoming messy. And now I just think that's something that somebody would have just reminded me that that's a good practice to do. And so that's my only point for bringing it up here. And there's nothing really specific about it. It's just it's a good practice.
Yeah, just maintainability issues for sure. I think this is it's a common automation pitfall, exactly what you're describing, right? So I've got an organization, and maybe we're getting the product off the ground, and it's really fairly straightforward at this point. And people have heard about automated testing, so like, yeah, let's start automating. And then you start building out your automation, and you're not always looking down the road, right? And stuff then turns out to be problematic. As you say, it gets messy, and you start finding, wow, it's taken me a while to fix things when I need to make changes and so forth. And I've seen this get so dysfunctional that the average amount of time required to maintain an existing automated test was equal to or greater than the amount of time to create a new test. It's kind of like, okay, guess what? You have now broken your automation framework from a maintainability point of view. And by the time you get there, it's kind of like the old cartoons where the coyote is, he's already actually a good 5 or 10 yards past the edge of the cliff before he realizes that he's run off the edge of the cliff, and then has that looks down, gets the horrified look on his face, legs stop moving, and down he goes, right? And I've seen that happen a bunch of times with automation. I guess I had a comment in here from Colin. We share your pain, Rex. So, yeah, this is a really common death spiral of automation, and I've seen it a number of times. And it's kind of sad. I mean, in a way, I've get called in to do an automation assessment, and I'm looking at it, and I'm seeing these kind of metrics like, average time to maintain a test exceeds the time to create a new test, and that sort of thing. And it's like, oh boy, you guys are hosed, Yep. It's I heard this great joke from Mike Birbiglia the other day. He was talking about getting some sort of medical diagnosis, and the doctor comes in and said, we found something in your bladder. And his joke was, when the doctor says to you, we found something in your bladder, it's never a good thing. It's not like he's going to say, hey, I found season passes to the Yankees in your bladder. No. Okay, so when a consultant like me comes in and, it's like saying, well, I found something really interesting with your metrics, it's not always a good thing.
That's apt.
Yeah. So Gary, my colleague Gary had a question for you here. It's a little bit kind of on that topic of metrics. He's asking, do you have metrics on ROI for Selenium testing, or the proportion of your projects where the ROI was very high? I'm assuming Gary's talking about ROI just in the sense of it's saving you time with respect to how long it would take you to do it manually. Do you have any sort of sense on that?
No, actually, we're a 17-person company, so we don't gather a lot of metrics at all, to be honest. But it's been anecdotally very useful. The scenario is generally where we have a depth build, and something changed that I would have never thought of even in the release test, because it's so kind of down into the weeds of the code, that I would not have thought that I needed to test it for a particular, let's say a bug, let's say a hotfix, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a bad example because a hotfix is a lot more targeted. But let's just say a release, and it catches those kind of bugs where it should not have broken. There's no reason to focus on that, but the testing is there for every bit of functionality. So how do you measure that ROI? It's hard.
Well, what you're talking about there is defect detection, and if you have an idea of what your cost of a defect detected in production is relative to the cost of the defect detected prior to release, you can get a measure of that. Usually when I work with clients on looking at ROI for automation, there's kind of the big three things that they're trying to do. They're trying to reduce the total effort required to achieve a given level of coverage or risk mitigation. They might also be trying to reduce the cycle time, how long it takes to run through their tests. And sometimes that's even more important to some of my clients because time to market is huge. Like one of my clients, somehow or another, they had this number that it cost them $250,000 every day of delay they had in releasing their medical device. Yeah, $250,000, right? So they were really focused on how do we make our validation cycles shorter? Because as you know, I believe you've worked in regulated medical before, right? If you got to have one clean pass through all your tests with them all passing at the end before you can release. They're like, well, it takes us 2 weeks to do that now, right? So it's like 14 times $250,000, for every extra cycle that we have to do, And then the third metric is often related to defects of what's the cost of a defect that escapes. But a lot of times with automation, that's not really the right metric to look at because pesticide paradox says I run the same set of tests over and over again, and eventually I stop finding bugs with them. So I always discourage clients when they're using, number of defects found by the regression test as their primary metric of ROI for their automation. I say that's in the long term, that's not going to turn out too well because what you're really trying to do is accomplish the opposite. Right? Getting to a situation where your code is so stable and your maintenance process is so predictable that you're not finding any defects, and your automation is part of how you get there. So you don't want the ROI of the way you measure the ROI of the automation to push you in the opposite direction of what you really would want to accomplish.
Yeah, it's interesting because in general, it makes the most sense to do positive tests for automated tests. I'm talking about, we're specifically talking about Selenium, so it's going to be UI focused. But what I find really interesting is that I can also run some automated tests that are essentially API level tests. So there's a module where you can do HTTP requests, and I find it more fruitful to put negative tests within that within those tests. So it's actually deeper testing with the API non-UI level automated tests. But that sometime maybe we could talk about that. Virtually over Scotch or something, because it just seems like it pays off better once you take out some of the UI aspect of it. But,
So I got a question here, which I think is kind of a good way of winding this up, unless there are further questions that come in. But Colin says, thanks for having this session. Is there a plan to host a more in-depth session for beginners and intermediate users? And I guess the answer to that would be, well, we do offer a training that covers this topic over 3-day hands-on training. So, we would hope that people would check that out and maybe look at that. And, I feel like this is stuff that that would be covered in that. as far as doing another session on these kinds of topics, I guess depends on Jose, your availability and level of expressed interest.
Yeah, no, but I would definitely recommend that that course. I'm a bit biased, but
One of the authors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting though because I was definitely the junior technical person on that one,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned a lot because it's good material.
Yeah, and I would hope that it was the kind of like that's what you need to know to parachute in and be able to participate, right, as an automator.
Correct. Yeah. That is I was only alluding to some of the material in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, in this time frame, yeah, that's why it's. You said it's a 3-day course.
Isn't it 3 or is it 2?
I can't remember, but I never actually taught it, so Jamie would know.
Yeah, Jamie would know. I haven't taught it either. It's Jamie teaches it. I think it's 3 days.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So that's how you can actually get it into the meat of it.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I had some guy come up to me at a conference and say he's going to start doing a lot of Selenium automation, and he went to his boss, and his boss was like, "Oh yeah, I've heard that stuff's really easy. You just need to have all of your people, his testers, right, who are all completely non-technical, right? They had zero technical background." The guy said, "You need to have your testers watch a bunch of free YouTube videos." And that will be adequate to get them started. And I said to the guy, "I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a big prediction that that's going to be an utter fail." So yeah. That's not going to work. I said, if you had people who had extensive programming and test automation experience, and the only thing they were doing was a minor gear shift from one automation tool to Selenium, that would be one thing, right? But you're talking about, helping people become automators. That's not a gear shift. That's a mind shift,
Yeah, I mean, there are actually two domains that are important if you're doing it from scratch, right? There's being able to be a good overall tester, and then the other is all of the actual coding that's involved. It's I'll be honest, it's lightweight coding, but it's still coding.
Right.
And if you don't have that mindset or those skills, you're going to fail.
Yeah, and as you said, it is important that you have both. We're working with a client right now. We're running this test design with BDD training for them, and the reason for that is that they sort of took the approach of saying, we're going to focus on the technical side of the automation. We're going to automate a bunch of tests. And they achieved a lot of automation, but then what they found was, wow, we still have this insane defect escape rate. And it was like, well, yeah, of course you do, because you did it. See, they approached it the exact opposite way. They were like, we're just going to have our developers automate tests for all the code they write, and never taught them anything about, good test design or implementation. So they just went off and started flailing around, created a bunch of tests, but they weren't very good tests. So that's a good point. You have to have both skills.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got a confirmation here from Dina. She says, yes, the course is 3 days. So three-day course. I believe we have virtual sessions of that scheduled coming up if people are interested. So they can find it on our website. Well, we ran a little long, but I want to thank you for sticking with it, Jose, and for your presentation. I'm sure people got a lot of good information out of it. Gary's saying, thanks for the session. Great job, Jose and Rex. Thanks, Gary. So I will wind this down with a few words about us. So you see the advertisement here. And I hope you enjoyed our free webinar from RBCS. Series continues. It's been over 10 years and over over 50,000 registrations for these webinars. So quite a successful thing, and we're going to keep at it. We do these free webinars as a service to the software testing community because at RBCS we are a not just for profit company. But if you enjoy our free webinars and feel they demonstrate solid insights into the kinds of testing challenges you face, please do make RBCS your preferred software testing vendor for any and all expert services, consulting, or training. Happy to provide a quote for any such help you might need. You can contact us, info@rbcs-us.com. So thanks again, Jose.
So Rex, I just have to throw this in.
Yeah.
Rex and I go way back, and including that he's the guy who put me in Paris in 2001.
Yes.
And, so his crowning moments one time was we're on the banks of the Seine, and there's this Yugoslavian boyfriend of somebody that worked there who called Rex the capitaliste américain. And Rex was never prouder.
Yes, I don't think he meant it as a compliment, but I certainly took it as one. It was
I know, I love that. I remember that so well.
Yeah, so do I. That was immediately prior to the evening at the Three Mallets, with the dancing girls on the tables. Yeah, it was quite a memorable evening, a classic Paris moment.
Yeah. All right.
So that was a while back. Yeah, a good time. But anyway, thanks, Jose, for taking time out of your day to do this, and thanks to everybody for joining us. And look forward to seeing people on future webinars.
Peace.
Peace out.